You were trained at Sandhurst before going over to India.
Yes.
The Indian Army, as such, it was very much an army made of Indian soldiers. Also.
Totally Indian soldiers, officered by British officers. But when I joined it, the decision has been made to officer it by Indian officers. And we were gradually training young Indians to officer the Indian Army. But when I joined it, it was essentially officered by British officers.
It was a different kind of army, I understand, self-contained, but specifically trained for the situation over there, isn't it?
Well, of course, we trained very particularly for the constant war situation we had on the northwest frontier, and but we were trained for general warfare.
Was it like in England an army of a professional army, basically?
Oh yes, it was. It was very professional.
They were not recruited. And what was so special about it?
I don't think there was anything very special about it. It was an army, and a very well-trained army.
Because in the beginning, am I right to think that, before the war, it was rather small, was it? It grew up with the war into millions.
Of course, yes. Before the war, I think it was 150,000 strong.
I don't think it had as much reporting as it should have had. I think it could be much more, but of course, you see, in India, we were all very much taken up with trying to raise the Indian army, which was a voluntary army. There was no conscription or anything, everybody was a volunteer, and we raised it right up to 2.5 million people. And so there was a hell of a lot of work in that, trying to do that, so you didn't have time really to think very much about what was going on elsewhere. If I could give you the example, I was in a combined training battalion of 2 regiments, the Bombay Grenadiers, which was my regiment, and the Jat regiment. They had been combined earlier on, 10 years earlier on, because their numbers had been reduced. Now it was decided after 1941 to take the Bombay Grenadiers separately and reopen their own training centre. I was adjutant at the time. It meant I took 2 companies, which is all we had, of probably about 300 to 400 men, and had to raise them up into a unit of something like 13,000.
I was in India for a year, during which we trained raw recruits up to battle standard, which was quite difficult in the time available, as you could imagine. Well, we were then told we were going to Malaya. This was before the Japs were in the war, I remember. But, so we painted all our equipment jungle green, and we'd just finished it. The day we finished it, we got orders to go to Iraq. So we had to start all over again and paint them all sand colour.
And I found myself saying, at the age of about 19, I suppose I was, are you short of men, sir, to the colonel? And he said, what do you mean, short of men? I said, could I join your regiment, sir? So he said, what do you want to do that for? I said, well, my best friend is with you, and I'd rather like to join you. And he said, yes, we'll have you. I said, I'll arrange it. And give him his due, he got in his staff car some couple of weeks later and came down to Cowley Barracks in Oxford and had me dug out. And that's how I got to Oxford. But I was in the 47th for about 6 or 7 months. And after about that time, Colonel Misa asked me if I would come and have dinner with him one night, and didn't ask me if, but how much I was in debt. And then he said to me, look, the war in Japan is, the Japanese are coming into the war pretty soon, and if you'd like to go and join our sister regiment in India, I'll give you a good chit, and you'll be able to live on your pay and keep a polo pony.
So this is how it was. They were sort of sister regiments. There were regiments in the UK who had associations with regiments already in the Indian subcontinent, and it was dating back for a long time, I suppose.
Well, dating back certainly to the 1860s, and we were affiliated to the Indian Cavalry Regiment. Actually, my other friend at Morven, his father commanded what was called Skinner's Horse. This is Skinner's Horse. They're the famous yellow boys. They wore a yellow kurtas. But unfortunately, they hadn't got a vacancy for me. But the second in command of Skinner's Horse was going off to command the 19th Lancers, 19th King George of his own Lancers, that's them, and he agreed to take me with him. So I joined the 19th King George of his own Lancers in 1940 and remained with them until 1945 when I came back home.
1995 there were the celebration of the VE, Victory in Europe, and VJ, Victory in Japan, days in this country. And during Victory in Japan, VJ Day, there were quite a lot of Indians brought here, and there was quite a lot of focus on the Indian involvement, because of course in Burma, the 3/4 of the army was Indian. But in VE Day, there was very little mention of the Indians, because somehow the Indians were forgotten from North Africa, from southern Europe, from Italy, from all the places where if you go and see the cemeteries, you see the names are all Indian. And I was a bit upset by that. And anyway, that was the time when I first learned how many people had volunteered. The figures were like between 2.5 and 2.8 million Indians. And I was shocked that there was so little mention in this country about those people.
If you went to Menon Gate, if you find the names out of the 10 soldiers, if you count 10, out of 10, 7 are Indians. Out of 7, 4 or 6. You will find the name out of 10, 7 are Indians, 4 or 6, more than 50% are Sikhs. So there, when I was in Menon Gate, I joined the ceremony in the evening. There is a ceremony every evening, you know that. So after the ceremony, when I walked from the pavement to cross the road to the other pavement, one old lady with 2 children in tow, she came to me. She took my hand and kissed. She said, "You saved us." This was an emotional scene I could see. I was pictured at that time, but that picture is not available now. So she stopped me, took my hand, kissed my hand, and said that you have saved us. So I think she is a French lady, perhaps, I hope so. And that was marvelous of the people who could still have the gratitude for the people who died for them and all that. It's a marvelous thing, such a gracious thing on the part of the French.